What's up, Vault Hunters? I'm Sh55, and this is Ultimate Vault Hunters. A few weeks ago, frequent guest on the show, Triple G, hosted an event called the Endgame Rush. Several community members undertook this calling, in which players attempted to complete various endgame activities as fast as possible. Today, we are pleased to bring one of the top 3 competitors to the program, TBJ Quag, with his third place winning build, Rakk Stab. With a completion time slightly under an hour and a half, you know this build isn't just one for the birds. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining the conversation. Whether you're joining us on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, or listening along on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Spotify, we thank you for tuning in and listening to the program. TBJ Quag, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, this has been great. Birdman recommended you. He said that you were super awesome. And we saw you got third place in the Endgame Rush that Triple G put on?
Yeah, I was the third place runner. I was the first place flak time. There were 2 Zanes in front of me.
Ooh, nice, nice. Well, this is good because we have a flak build to check out here soon. So I'm excited to see that. Are you participating in his new challenge as well?
For this one, I did put up some early times, but I feel like letting other people take the lead this time would be fun because the particular strat for flak in this competition is running a build made by someone else, and I want them to do their thing. They're better with it to begin with in the first place. So I like that jointly that setup and my own could be considered like peak flak for these competitions so far.
That's awesome. What a team player you are. All right, well, let's get into some questions. I have so many things to ask you about yourself. Where did your name TBJ Quag come from anyway?
So I'll explain the Quag part first. This part's a lot simpler. I was playing, this was about 9 years ago. 9 years ago now. Wow, I'm old. Where I was playing a lot of MMOs and I had no idea what I wanted to go by name-wise. I didn't really have anything that I went by at the time. So I just clicked the random name generator in one of the games I was playing until it was something that wasn't utterly offensive to me. And it was Quag, so I just went with it. And almost a decade later, that's what I am now.
Nice. All right. So what about the TBJ part? Because I have some thoughts and they're inappropriate. So
it's maybe slightly less inappropriate than you're worried.
Okay.
TBJ is mostly just a reference to a nickname I went by in high school that references my actual given name. And my Twitch chat being utter degenerates.
As they are.
Yeah, I have a few ideas what TBJ stands for, but the one that we decided works best for everyone that they referred to me as while I stream is the Big Juicy.
So still inappropriate. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
I love that. That's cool. All right, we'll go with that. The Big Juicy. I'm gonna call you Quag. So
please do.
All right. So how did you get started in gaming?
The very first game I played was on one of those super old neon green handhelds. Trying to figure out how to read while learning how to game is a very difficult thing, but I was a voracious reader growing up as a kid. Wanted the games that had as much text on the screen as possible, so I played a lot of classic RPGs on handhelds, and I played those, and eventually I moved up to consoles a couple years later. And my very first online gaming experience was being yelled at in an FPS for flipping over a vehicle. And of course, the passengers did not know that at my young age, I was figuring things out. They were very unkind. And I like to think that made me who I am today.
Oh, my goodness. We've all had the experience of getting yelled at by randos in a video game. So it makes us who we are, for sure. Okay, so when and how did you first get involved with the Borderlands series?
The first Borderlands game came out while I was in high school. And at the time, I played a lot of first-person shooters in general. So I saw a commercial for this one. And my first thought was, wow, this is wacky. This is weird. This is different. Yeah. So I went and picked it up after school one day. And I sat down and started playing. And the very first thing that struck me was how the atmosphere was just unlike anything else I'd played at the time. And just that one little hook pulled me in, and then all the different loot, the look of the weapons, the characters, the art style, all of it pulled me in. And I spent a lot of hours in high school just sitting on the couch playing Borderlands instead of doing things I should have been doing. And I stuck with the series for every game since.
Wow, that's awesome. So who was or were the community members who were instrumental in helping you along the way?
I have to give a lot of credit here to two creators who are good friends of mine now, Lazy Data and I Love Cheese 2. They're great people, great friends. I spent a lot of time when I was first getting into the Borderlands community, more on the Twitch YouTube side instead of just casually on my couch. I first started watching, I should mention Killer 6 as well. I watched some Killer 6 YouTube videos to catch me up on everything that had happened with Borderlands 2's DLC season. And then I started watching Twitch streams, and the first one I saw was Lazy. And this was right as Borderlands 3 had come out. And this was a guy who had all of this anointed gear. He was doing this crazy damage. He was doing endgame builds already on the first day. And I was like, wow, this is, you can do a lot with this game. I've always been a person who was very builds minded. So that was an instant draw. And because on a perhaps less wholesome note, but that eventually becomes wholesome, I was going through a lot of life changes at the time. My sleep schedule wasn't exactly the healthiest. So yeah, I found Cheese's channel because he streams overnights in US time.
Oh, okay.
He goes live at midnight. So I would always be awake. So just lurking in that chat gave me something to do instead of hating that I couldn't sleep. I had something positive, and that just happened to also be Borderlands. So during the day, I had a creator I really loved watching, and at night, I had a creator I really loved watching. And eventually I started interacting more and more in both of their communities and became good friends with both of them. And here we are. We all support each other on our various platforms and everything. And it's great. It went from people I look up to people who I consider my peers as well. So.
Oh, that's such a sweet story. I love that. Would you say that their build styles had any influence on yours?
Lazy's builds absolutely had an influence because I loved seeing someone who was like, hey, this stuff is nice, but where's the damage though? Where's the damage? I like that damage thing. Give me more of that. And that is me to a T as well. I like see big number do thing. That's my build philosophy. And Cheese's builds are great as well, though he mechanically is, let's just say he's got much better aim than I do. So my builds tend to be, how can I do damage without having to actually aim well? And Cheese is like, hey, look what I can do while running at top speed, jumping off a cliff, spinning around 4 times. I'm not quite on that level. So I like to think I'm somewhere in the middle of those two styles.
That's cool. That's cool. Kind of, you consider yourself kind of a little bit casual, maybe?
In terms of mechanical ability in first-person shooters, absolutely. There are people way better at that than me. I like the theory side of things.
Ooh, I like that. I like that for sure. Are you into the math at all? Are you a math person?
I've done more math after getting involved in Borderlands 3 theory crafting than I have in my entire adult life.
You're going to use this one day. Yeah, well, I get it.
Little did I know.
That's hilarious. Okay, so how would you say that those creators assisted you on your journey to where you are now?
They were some of the first people to help me pull in more people to my own platform. I was convinced by a couple friends who had been yelling at me for months, like, hey, the amount of time you spend talking my ear off about explaining this mechanic or this interaction, you should go and you should stream this. People would watch you do this. So one day I just decided, hey, let's do it. Let's make this happen. And I did my thing, and Cheese has a little self-promo channel for friends who are trying to grow. Uh-huh. And so every day when I went live for my 3 viewers, I would plug in there and I would feel really good about it. And then from time to time, Lazy would drop by and he would host me. And this was such a big deal because as we know, and you guys have obviously worked closely with Lazy,
Yeah.
he's got an audience, and
An amazing audience.
those things just really helped me grow early on. I owe a lot of my early success to so many different creators, more people than I can name at once, but those two in particular have really done a lot for me.
That's super sweet. Which characters did you main in Borderlands, Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, if applicable, and Borderlands 3?
In the first Borderlands game, I picked up Lilith immediately, and I have to say, to this day, I just enjoy Lilith more than all the others in that game. I just can't get into a playthrough of Borderlands 1 without being like, but I could be playing Lilith though. Just the playstyle, the aggression, the phase walk is the most iconic action skill in Borderlands, the entire franchise, and you can't change my mind. Borderlands 2, I played a mix of Maya and I played a lot of Gage. And then in the pre-sequel, I played Athena the first time I went through the game, and I didn't pay too much attention to the character. I was more playing for the story when I first went through. But recently, this year, I went back to the game and I did a playthrough as Timothy, and I quite enjoyed that. Oh, Timothy cool. is a really well-designed and enjoyable character, and I love his place in the story in Borderlands 3 in particular. Had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, he's got a really good storyline. In that Definitely. One DLC. What about Borderlands 3?
Borderlands 3, I am a Flak player.
Yes.
We did the math on my stream the other day, and I have about 3,700 hours in Borderlands 3, and about 3,000 of those are on Flak.
Wow. What's your second favorite character?
My second most played is Amara. My second favorite bounces between Amara and Zane, depending on what's going on in the game and what I feel like playing at the time.
I am appalled. No love for Mose.
Mose is great. Mose, from a design perspective, is done very well, and I'm a huge fan of the voice work, the art style, everything that went to Mose. It's just I don't find the playstyle. The playstyle is not for me. I'm too aggressive to play Mose properly. Huh. I like hitting more buttons, and Mose is a bit slower.
All right, that's fair. Yeah, I do have to say that I've never really dug my heels into Zane, so I don't know what I'm missing at this point. But Triple G plays Zane a lot too, and I need to talk to him about what kind of build I should go for with the new purple tree. But yeah, that's crazy though. I very much expect a lot of people to say Mose is their number 2, but that's interesting. You said Mara and then Zane in that order?
Yes, it would be Flak, Amara, Zane, Mose for me.
Wow, disappointed. Okay, so Flak is my favorite, which is great. Okay, so what attracted you to these characters?
So with Flak, I saw the robot archetype, and it's really as simple as the very first thing. This is something I've tried to pinpoint for a while, is robots are cool. Robots are cool. So I saw the Flak reveal, and I was patiently waiting for the reveal of the skill trees before the release of the game, because I really wanted to see how Flak would work. And then when we finally got it, I saw some of the skill interactions. I was like, I could do a lot with that. So I went for Flak, and that was a change of pace for me, because in the previous numbered entries to the game, the first character I did was always the Siren, and I feel like a lot of people did that in a lot of games.
Yeah, the Sirens are always really strong though. Yeah,
the Sirens are always a safe bet. They're consistent. They're very friendly to the player. It feels like home for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I suppose I wanted to go a bit out of my comfort zone, and I'm very glad I did. Flak is perfect for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. They didn't show the Flak skill tree when they were doing the reveals till dead last.
Yeah, which, Flak reveals late.
I don't understand why, but I'm glad they they left it to last because he's, to me, was the most interesting. And he's the first character that ever played in the game. So that's cool. What's your favorite element?
My favorite element is radiation by far. The sound of a radiation explosion, I could use that as white noise to fall asleep to. Nothing compares. It's just so satisfying. Radiation is that element that not only does it look good, it feels good, it sounds good, but it just is good. If you put a little bit of radiation in any build, whenever you kill an enemy, they blow up, they hurt another enemy, and it's everything about radiation was amazing design. I love it.
My favorite element too. Look at that. That's two things already. We're on a roll. Okay, so
Black
what
Mains
element?
Unite.
Yeah, right. Black Mains. Let's go. Will that element be featured prominently in Rackstab?
You do get a little bit of radiation from an anointment on our grenade slot in Rackstab, because like I mentioned, those radiation explosions are very key to going through mobbing sections more quickly. As if you can just get just the slightest bit of radiation on an enemy, it can lead to more dying in that explosion than you would have otherwise gotten without the element at all.
Fair. I like it. Okay, so before we delve deep into Borderlands 3, what were some fond memories of builds you had in previous Borderlands games?
As much of a joke build as it was, I enjoyed after the Commander Lilith DLC came out in Borderlands 2, using the Hot Mama Sniper on Gage, because you didn't get the accuracy penalty from Anarchy stacks on that sniper rifle. So you had all of your damage from Anarchy, and you still had a pinpoint accurate weapon, completely defying the design of the character. It was just so wacky and weird. And the Hot Mama was one of those weapons that spoke to you. So it said some very interesting lines at some very weird moments. And I have fun memories of playing around with that.
Wow, interesting. Okay. So recently you participated in Triple G's Endgame Rush, which we talked about earlier, the community challenge, and you took third place overall, which, by the way, is huge because there was a lot of competition in that. And congratulations on your success in the competition. How did you get involved in the event?
I first got involved in the event because a year ago, there was another community challenge running, and that was my first foray into content creation at all for Borderlands. I decided to compete in that challenge. I was playing Flak for that as well, of course, because, me, Flak, like this. It was just as simple as uploading footage of my runs to YouTube as proof of, proof for the competition.
Right.
And that started my interest in that sort of community challenge. So when Triple G decided to do that, at this point in Borderlands 3, we're between content releases. We're waiting for more details on the upcoming DLC. Mm-hmm. It was just a perfect time to give the community a chance to sort of make our own content. We could have our own competition. And I like friendly competition because it motivates improvement. If there's someone right on my heels time-wise, that forces me to be better. And absolutely. I enjoy improving.
That's awesome. That's a great way to look at it. That's the way I've always looked at anyone around you who's doing well. It's always like rising tides raise all ships, that type of thing. So like you do better, I will try to do better, but that's great. That's awesome. What were some of your favorite moments while participating in the event?
There was one time where I believe this was my final run, where I was utterly convinced that a mistake I had made earlier in the run had just ended the run for me. I was finishing out the run because I was like, this is the best attempt that I've gotten this morning. I may as well finish it out, see what the time looks like, see what I can change later on. And then I had this moment towards the end. This was in the last 5 or so minutes of the run where I was like, wait, what's that time right now? I had somehow, despite completely mishandling a particular section of the run that I normally do far better on, I had picked up time in every section following that in the entire run. I just played perfectly after that mistake, and I made up enough time to have a new personal best.
You rallied. That's awesome. That's so cool. And then you came in third place.
I did. I'm very happy with it.
And then we heard about you because you came in third place. So we're super grateful that you participated in the event because now
I'm
you're
glad to be here. I'm honored, really.
Oh, you're so sweet. Okay, so tell us about some of your work with the official Borderlands Discord.
So I recently got invincible status in the official Borderlands Discord, which was an honor. It's something that they give to people who do a lot of work in the community, helping people with questions they might have in, say, the builds channel, where I spend perhaps entirely too much time. I maintain the community Flak builds document that is a pinned resource there. It is currently 48 pages of builds, resources, information on mechanics, all of that. I maintain that. It's changed hands between a few people over the over a year now. Wow, since it's been a thing. But currently, it is just me maintaining this, and it's a lot of work from a lot of people has gone into it. I'm very proud of it. I plug it every chance I can, and I believe that is my biggest contribution to the official Borderlands server, maintaining that.
That's awesome. Congratulations on your title, and what a wonderful resource as well. So what's the spark that leads you to creating a full build?
Usually I'll have an idea around either a weapon or a mechanic, or more commonly, it'll be the third one, which is frustration with something. I will want some sort of, it'll be me trying to shove the square peg into the round hole mechanically. I'm like, I know I can do something with this. I know I can improve this. I know I can make this interaction work. Or if that character can do this, well, Flak can do it too. So that sort of thing is actually what led to the creation of Rakk. It was a very late night, and I was frustrated with, I saw something cool on another build, and in a Mara build, actually, where there was a lot of melee interactions and a lot of action skill use. And I was like, I really wish you could do something spectacular like that with Rakk. So I just kind of threw stuff together, messed with stuff for a couple hours, and eventually was like, oh, this is a build now. Cool. Well, let's optimize this.
That's awesome. Would you say it's focused more on roles such as support, melee, range damage, or speed running?
It's all about doing as much damage as possible with as little input as possible.
Oh.
Essentially, what it is you run through area, you use action skill, everything around you dies, and you move on. This is what makes it so suited to speedrunning. You don't have to worry about aiming, so my bad aim isn't a factor. And
nice.
it's using math to do damage. I mentioned earlier that I've done more math in the Borderlands 3 community than I have in my entire adult life. Well, this is where it pays off. Knowledge of damage formulas, of which Flak has the best of any character. One of the reasons why I'm so gung-ho about playing Flak. All of that combines to make what is on the surface a very simple build, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Cool. What would you say is the single most important aspect of creating a successful build?
Knowledge of character mechanics, knowing just exactly what makes your character tick, why your character is good, and how those strengths relate to those of other characters. Because let's say you have an interaction that you like on your character and that would succeed on that character, but another character can do it more efficiently. Are you doing a build for that character, or are you forcing a build from another character to work on the one that you're playing?
Interesting. Do you feel like you did that with this character?
I feel like it started as me trying to copy something from another character that ended up working better on this one.
Interesting. All right, cool. I can't wait to see it. Let's get into it. Take us through the build. Where are we going to start first?
So first thing we're going to start with is the blue tree. Now, you might be very used to, as you Flak players out there, go down red tree, get to Megavore. Yes, we're doing that here.
Okay.
But
spoiler.
Spoiler, yes. The most important thing here is going to be knowledge of a damage formula. So I'm going to have some interesting names for things. It's going to sound like gibberish, but I will do my best to be as clear about this going forward.
All right.
So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to put 2 points in ferocity, where Flak's pet deals increased damage. Now, this is not synergistic with the build in any significant way. This is to get down the skill tree, and it is less wasteful than putting points in Go for the Eyes.
Okay, fair.
Then we're going to put 3 points in Persistent Hunter. Now, this is a Rakk setup, so the action skill duration doesn't do anything for us, but the gun damage is incidentally going to be useful on the rare occasion we do fire a weapon. It is not often at all with this build, but it does happen. So this isn't wasted.
Okay.
In the second tier on the left, we have Who Rescued Who. Now, this is a very underrated skill. Just 1 point in this is functional immortality for your pet. Because the way it works is it converts some of your damage dealt into lifesteal for your pet. Now, if you're dealing literal billions of damage, even just a small percentage of that is going to keep your pet alive at all times. So just that 1 point there carries an insane amount of utility.
Awesome.
Then we're going to move one slot over to He Bites. When Flak's pet takes damage, the pet returns some of that damage to the attacker. 1 point in this skill is essential for any Flak build that is going down Blue Tree, because this facilitates its neighbor, Frenzy. When Flak's pet deals damage, Flak and their pet gain a stack of Frenzy. Each stack of Frenzy increases damage, and the stacks decay after a few seconds. Now, this damage type is something the community calls V1 damage. We have different names for different damage types, but this one is special. This particular type of damage is something that only Flak gets in skill tree. Out of any Vault Hunter, Flak is the only one that gets this particular multiplier from skill tree. Other characters, either from a specific anointment from the Bloody Harvest event, from the Kukakombo Guardian rank perk, or from a Victory Rush artifact. Those are the only non-Flak sources of this damage type. So this is significant. The way damage formulas in this game work, broadly speaking, are you want to diversify your damage bonus types as much as possible so they all multiply each other and you get a bigger number in the end.
Okay.
So Frenzy and He Bites work in tandem because your pet taking damage will then deal enemies that are attacking it that damage. Not a true reflection of the damage, but a small amount based off of how much was dealt to the pet. And then that will trigger a stack of Frenzy on top of what you would get for the pet normally attacking. So this will allow you to keep full stack of Frenzy at all times, which means you get more damage as the Flak player.
Right.
So we're going to put 5 in Frenzy and 3 in He Bites, partially to help us get past the next tier where there's not too much of value for us, but we are going to put 1 out of 1 point in Psycho Head on a Stick. This will let the pet move faster in the event that we need it to revive us or get in position for certain mechanics against certain bosses. Like, let's say you can park your pet right under Wotan the Invincible in the Maliwan takedown, and because it has He Bites and Wotan has that aura of damage around it, your pet can just make Wotan hurt itself and pass phases.
Cool.
Moving on to the 4th tier of the blue skill tree, we have Barbaric Yawp. This skill can be a bit confusing to people not familiar with how Flak works, but what this does is it increases the power of pet bonuses granted to Flak. Now, if you look at each pet, these are on the sides of the skill tree, they all have individual bonuses that they give to Flak. In this particular build, we are using one of the pets from the red tree that we will go over later. But these bonuses are increased in potency by Barbaric Yawp. This will be very important when we get to the red tree. But for now, we'll keep moving down. We're going to go down to Pack Tactics. Now, if you remember, I said V1 damage while we were talking about Frenzy. Pack Tactics gives the same type of damage. So this is a significant multiplier to the rest of your damage boosts in that you don't get this damage type in a lot of places. So this is a very large, flat, non-conditional value for this damage. You get 21% before class mod. You can boost this even higher depending on your class mod choices. But you at 3 out of 3, you get 21% bonus damage. It's very impactful. So moving forward, we go to the red tree.
Right.
And this is where a lot of the core aspects of the build come from. This is where our action skill is, Rakk Attack.
Okay.
And the reason why we choose Rakk Attack for Rakk Stab is because it is one of the most spammable action skills in the game. You can use this to trigger anointment effects. The only thing that triggers anointments faster and more often than this is Zane's Mantis Cannon. So it's Zane's Mantis here, Rakk's are right here for that.
Fair.
Now we're going to take our Rakk attack and move down to the first tier. And the first thing of note, and I'm a broken record here, V1 damage from Interplanetary Stalker.
All right.
Every time you kill an enemy, you will not only get a little chunk of V1 damage, you will also get a bonus depending on the species of whatever you killed. So if you kill a robot, you will get bonus corrosive damage. This is hugely impactful in the Mal1 takedown. You will get action skill damage from killing humans, and that will help your Rakks, which are not a massive chunk of your overall damage, but it is free damage. And then for killing beasts, you'll get movement speed, which is quite nice, in particular in the Guardian takedown, as there are those sections at the very beginning and between each boss fight where you have to deal with some Necrotafeo beasts.
Yes.
Moving to the right to Leave No Trace. Whenever Flax scores a critical hit, there's a chance for 1 ammo to be added to their magazine. Now, you might question why we have points here in this build that is not really centered around shooting guns, but on occasion we are going to fire our weapon, and this is essentially free quality of life. Hey, you never have to reload. You don't want to. So this will help with that. One important thing to note is that we have so many critical hit effects going on. This will just happen regardless of you having to think about it. So it's one of those, you put points here and it will make your life easier type skills. Then moving to the right again, we have Second Intention. This is a hunter kill skill. Whenever Flak kills an enemy, they gain increased reload speed. This is largely just to improve moving between different strategies. If you need to use your res to revive your pet, if you need to switch to a face puncher to get a second wind, those types of things, this will help smooth out transitions between different approaches to different situations. It's just 1 point because we want to have the utility. And as this is a hunter skill, it is boosted by any effects that boost hunter skill, such as big game later down in the tree. We will get to big game.
Great.
Moving down to the second tier, we have Hunter's Eye. Now, this is actually a hunt skill. This is boosted by big game. This is a little known fact. This is part of the weirdness of Flak, but this is indeed a hunter skill. So it's even better than it looks. Flak gains bonuses when fighting different types of enemies. You get critical hit damage against humans, not hugely impactful for this setup. We'll get into that later. Armor damage versus robots. Now this is huge. This damage type is V2 damage. So you heard me saying V1 before. This is V2. Now this is an entirely separate category. More characters have access to this boost. It's a lot more plentiful than V1, but since it is separate from V1, that means that it multiplies with it.
Oh,
so
great.
Having different kinds of damage boosts is what's going to lead this build to its peak. So this V2 armor damage is very impactful. Then you have damage reduction against beasts, just helps you live a little bit longer sometimes. Moving to the right of that, we have head count. Whenever Flak scores a critical hit, their action skill cooldown is reduced. Now, this is actually a predetermined skill. It is not chance-based. It is on a fixed seed. It will happen every so often. You can test this by getting a crit and seeing if you got a head count trigger, logging out, logging back in. It'll happen in the exact same place every time. So this is not chance-based. This is very consistent, and we can use that to our advantage. We don't get effects that trigger this in a traditional sense, as we're not firing guns in a predictable, I'm going to shoot this gun at this crit spot and get a crit to get my cooldown back so that I can use my action skill. That's not the main loop of this, but this is going to be more of a passive in the background. Okay, occasionally this will make the difference between me having my Rakks available now or me having my Rakks available a couple seconds from now. So we're going to put 3 points in that. So far, we've maxed in this tree. We've already maxed out 4 skills. Red tree is just such a good tree in terms of quality. The skill design is amazing in Flak's red tree. Then we're going to move down, and we're not taking Two Fang. We're going to skip that. But we are going to go to the right of that and pick up the Spider Ant Scorcher pet. Now, if you look at the description for the Spider Ant Scorcher, it says it gives elemental damage. This is a damage multiplier of another category. So we've already picked up 3 different damage multipliers that are going to be important for this build. Now, the Spider Ant Scorcher's boost is something that you will not get anywhere else in the skill tree. Flak cannot get this boost except through either items, the Spider Ant Scorcher, or Guardian rank. So this is the place where you take this. There are pets for Flak that provide other types of damage boosts, but this is the only one that does this. So that's why we're going for it.
All right.
So it's going to be very important that you take this. Now, since we took Barbaric Yawp over in the blue tree, instead of just getting 10% elemental damage, we're getting 30% elemental damage.
Wow.
So a full extra 20% that is multiplying the other stuff that we've got going on. This is very important. Elemental damage itself is one of the best multipliers for this build, as some of the rather interesting damage loops we'll be doing later on, they check this multiplier multiple times. So if you've ever heard the term,
you don't usually see elemental damage featured very much on Flak.
It's very impactful, but it's not an in-your-face thing the way Amara is like, hey, I use elements, boost me.
Right.
Flak is like, hey, stuff that says damage everywhere. So it can be hard to discern which ones are more impactful than others in a way that, let's say, Amara just doesn't necessarily have that problem. Big Game in the 4th tier of the skill tree. Big Game boosts any skill you see in the skill trees that says hunter skill or hunter kill skill. There's a lot of these throughout Flak's skill trees, but a couple examples that we have are Interplanetary Stalker and Second Intention in the red tree. As I mentioned before, Hunter's Eye is also a hunt skill. They play a little sneaky on you. It's in the name instead of on the card.
Right.
And then there are more further throughout the build, but Big Game is a staple of any Flak build that is able to get down this far red tree. It's a fantastic boost. Very important that you take this. And right next to it, its neighbor, the Most Dangerous Game. This gives us a large amount of gun damage, critical hit damage, handling, and pet damage. Now, going from the bottom to the top, pet damage is largely irrelevant to this build. It will affect our He Bites, which will affect our bossing options in a couple of scenarios, but that's just icing on the cake. The handling, not hugely impactful. On the rare occasions we do shoot, less recoil is nice, but again, not huge. The important thing we're getting here is the critical hit damage. Our primary damage is not critical hits, but some of our effects are able to critically hit. So this will help our mobbing to a significant degree. In fact, one of our main gear choices can do some very silly things when it hits crits. So
we'll touch on that later.
Yes. We have the gun damage will be the last stat that this skill boosts, and that will help our face puncher for when we shoot it in emergency situations.
Right.
And we're also using the Rakk augment from this tier in the tree. We're using Flock and Load, which adds 2 racks to every activation of Rakk attack that you do. So instead of the base of 2 racks, you get 4. Now this is just free damage. It's that simple. There's no greater thinking to it. It makes you do more damage, and I'm a big damage make number do thing guy.
Yeah.
As I said. Moving down to the 5th tier, we're taking the Rackcelerate augment. Now this gives an extra charge to your Rakk attack. So instead of the base of 2 charges, you have 3. And it increases your cooldown rate on Rakk attack by 20%. Now that's a very significant boost. It might not sound like it is on the surface, but the way that cooldown rate is calculated in this game, in a build that's centered around using your action skill as much as possible, every little tiny scrap of it you can get can make the difference between, hey, I can deal with this enemy right now because I have my action skill, or hey, I need to run around and wait because I don't have my action skill. Rackcelerate is huge. Then to its right, we have Galactic Shadow. Flak deals increased critical hit damage, and enemies are less likely to attack them. The enemies less likely to attack can be nice for survivability while you're learning the core gameplay loop of the build, while you're closing the distance to get to enemies, because this is something of a close range build in most scenarios. The critical hit damage is also nice for some of our secondary sources of damage. And then we have Grim Harvest. Flak gains increased gun damage and action skill damage. Flak's pet gains increased damage as well. Again, we're not really too concerned about pet damage. Gun damage is very secondary, but the action skill damage will help our Rakks as a secondary source of damage. And we still need to get down the skill tree. We need to get to the good stuff. We need to get to the thing that everyone associates with Flak perhaps more than any other skill in the entire game, Megavore.
Yeah.
Flak gains a chance to critical hit against any part of enemies, 20% chance. Now, Megavore does so much more than what people think it can do. It can make any effect that is capable of critical hitting naturally. It can make those crit whenever they hit. The exception to this is if you're throwing a Tediore. That can crit naturally, but Megavore doesn't play nice with that because of reasons. But the thing that we're going to be abusing to some degree here is if you have a bonus element on your grenade or shield, such as the on action skill end gain 50% radiation or corrosive or cryo, that element, that instance of damage, no matter what you put it on, you can make that crit with Megavore. So if you have that element, if you have that anoint, in this particular build, we have radiation on our grenade. You can go up, you can punch an enemy in the face. If you have Megavore, that radiation damage can crit, even though melee itself cannot crit. Now, this will be important for triggering our other critical hit-based effects, such as our Hollow Point Guardian rank skill. This will get our critical hit damage boost that we picked up from the Most Dangerous Game and Galactic Shadow. So Megavore facilitates some very interesting interactions of that kind.
This is crazy.
Moving on to the Green Tree. Green Tree is... I almost want to say I like it more than Red Tree in terms of the grand scheme of Flak because it has some very interesting utility. It has some great damage. It just does a lot of different cool things. But for the most part, for this particular build, we're here for utility. We're going to take Furious Attack just to get down the tree. Now, this will give us gun damage. This will give us handling. This will give us pet damage. Worth noting, this is a hunter skill. So this is boosted by Big Game over in the Red Tree. Okay. So this will act as a damage boost for our face puncher on the occasion that we have to shoot it. Again, it's not a regular thing. This is not a melee build people might be used to where it leans on the face puncher as primary damage. No, that's just something to have in your pocket just in case. But this is to get down the tree. And in the second
interesting, you didn't take a self-repairing system? You don't want the healing?
The reason why we don't take self-repairing system is because max health, the way it works in this game is enemies tend to either do so much damage that having an extra, say, 2,000 health in your pool will never be the difference between them downing you or not.
Okay.
They either do that much damage or they're so passive that they don't hit you to begin with. The health regen on this skill is nice, but due to some gearing choices and the vast amount of damage we have, we don't actually need to worry too much about survivability here. It is absolutely an option if you don't feel comfortable with the setup to go with self-repairing system. It will not hurt you. It just doesn't do much for you. The first tier of Green Tree in the setup is more deciding which situational thing you want.
Okay, fair.
In the second tier, we have Eager to Impress. This is a supremely underrated skill. It's a kill skill. Whenever Flak kills an enemy, action skill cooldown time is reduced. Whenever Flak's pet kills an enemy, action skill cooldown time is reduced even more, and an attack command's cooldown is refreshed. So the second half of that, we don't need to worry about that. We don't care about the attack command. We don't care about the pet killing enemies because it's not our primary source of damage in this particular setup. We care about whenever we get a kill, we just get a flat amount of time shaved off our cooldown. Flak's cooldown reduction skills, head count, and Eager to Impress are set up in such a way that they're much better than an action skill cooldown rate skill because they're external, meaning you don't have to deal with the point where a lot of people refer to it as diminishing returns. It's not necessarily diminishing returns where you have enough of a stat, another stat becomes more important. We don't have to worry about that because we get flat time shaved off our cooldown. So with 5 points in Eager to Impress, potentially more through class mod, you get 1.25 seconds shaved off of your Rakk attack cooldown every time you get a kill. Now, let's say you're jumping into the fray, you're using your Rakk attack. Let's say you kill 5 enemies. with one Rakk attack. That's instantly half of your cooldown of your Rakks back. One button press, instantly back.
That's awesome.
So that's a cornerstone for...
Does that work with the Rakk attack? So if you use Rakk attack and you kill 5 enemies, like, will that take your cooldown down?
It does. Anything you get a kill with will trigger Eager to Impress.
That's awesome.
It's great skill, one of my favorites. And then we're going to move down to tier 3 and get Lick the Wounds, which is a huge quality of life thing.
Yeah.
Any Flak player, I'm sure Liz can attest to this. Just sometimes there's too many explosions going on. Sometimes you down yourself. Sometimes there's a barrel in just the wrong place and you end up on the floor. It doesn't matter because your adorable pet can come over, get you back up, and you're back in the fight with Lick the Wounds. The pet damage on the skill is not something that's relevant here, but it never hurts to have more damage.
More damage, good.
Okay, that's the whole thing.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was a lot and really interesting choice of points and really going through the blue tree. I always viewed the blue tree as just the pet tree. And I was like, I don't want to go through the pet tree, but you've really highlighted some interesting synergies between like He Bites and Frenzy and things like that. So I'm excited to see what this can do. And interesting also that this is a vanilla build. So anybody can play it.
Yes, I love recommending this build whenever people ask about Flak builds because people who have not yet had a chance to try out Season Pass 2 and the Designer's Cut are worried that they're missing out on some builds, and this is one that isn't affected by that.
That's great. That's super cool. Okay, so I know you already mentioned it as we were going through, but just to reiterate, what augments do you take?
We use Rackcelerate and Flock and Load.
Okay, great. And I know you already explained them and everything, which is so thorough and amazing. You mentioned this briefly before as well. What is the main rotation of this build?
So this build can be as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. There's a few play styles within the envelope of Rackstab. The main thing, though, is you're going to run up, you're going to hit your Rakk attack, and because of the shield that we're wearing, you're going to send out a Nova, which is so powerful from all the damage boosts we picked up in our skill tree, that this Nova, let's put it in perspective, there is not a single enemy in this game that does not have an immune phase that can survive more than one of these Novas. You go up, you hit your action skill one time, every single enemy in the game that does not have an immune phase gets one shot.
Really?
Yes.
Prove it. I want to see it. This is awesome. I can't wait to see it.
I've spent many hours on stream trying to find enemies that could handle the might of Rackstab. And one suggestion that crosses my desk a lot is Sponge Boss from DLC 4, which has an obnoxious amount of health. Rackstab, I can walk up to the boss, take my hands off my keyboard, he will hit me, break my shield, and die.
What? All right, I'm going to need to see that. I'm going to need to see it happen. This is amazing. Cool. Also, can I have your build?
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. This is so cool. Okay, so what damage builds exist out there that could compare in numbers to this build?
When I talk about Flak builds, there are two that are kind of the pillars of how abusive damage formula can bring Flak to the top of the pack. And Rackstab is one of those, and you might have heard of Punchbot as the other one. If you know our good friend Lazy Data,
yep.
He created this abomination known as Punchbot, which fills the single target niche that Rackstab has the, hey, I'm going to walk by everything and have it die niche. So they're very comparable. And in the endgame rush competition where I had the top Flak run, Lazy was right behind me with one of his own setups. So
nice.
It's great to have cool Flak representation, the creators making these ridiculous damage setups. And I like defying the expectation that Flak is only the turn invisible and shoot things character. There's so many more things you can do. And I love the build diversity of Flak. Most of my favorite builds are going to be Flak builds. I might be slightly biased, but I really enjoy how you can put a lot of work into this character and be appropriately rewarded for it.
Awesome. So while we have you here, how did this build fare overall with the True Guardian takedown?
This build makes a joke out of True Guardian takedown.
Really?
The mobbing sections against the Necrodefeo mobs tend to be the gate of sorts that can intimidate a lot of people from wanting to get into the takedown, because they walk up, they're like, okay, I crushed the Mal one takedown, I've got this, and then they get to their first Necro mob and they're like, why is this a boss?
Right?
Why does this have so much HP?
So much hell.
But Rackstab walks into the section, says, okay, hi, all the enemies die. Okay, hi, all the enemies die.
That's awesome.
And with a simple gear change, you swap out your artifact as needed. There's a lot of gear flexibility in the setup. You can do the same thing to bosses. You wave your hand at them once, they catch on fire and go to their next phase.
Right. So how did it fare in the crystal activation sections?
The crystal sections are very, very simple with the setup, as it's a lot of area denial effects. I'm always having Novas go off around me whenever I hit my action skill. But additionally, because of our grenade choice and our class mod choice, when we hit an enemy with our Rakks, our Peregrine class mod triggers, dropping a copy of our grenade mod. And our grenade mod of choice is the Fish Slap, which you might remember from the Revenge of the Cartels event. It deals melee damage.
Which is only like level 57, if I remember.
Level 57, no mayhem levels. So this grenade is level 57 compared to our effective level 75 gear, and it is still the best option for this particular setup. It's amazingly powerful. But we use our Rakk attacks. Our Nova will clear any enemies near us, and then our Fish Slaps will clear any enemies away from us. So you can easily clear the crystal sections without an enemy even stepping foot on the platform.
What about Anathema?
Anathema is quite simple. You switch to an Unleash the Dragon artifact.
Okay.
And the way that artifact works is it places a burn on the enemy that scales off of how much melee damage you did to them to apply that status effect. So because we're using the Stinger Shield, we're using lots and lots of damage formula knowledge. We use our Stinger Nova, it applies the burn to the boss, and then it just melts. It just melts.
Cool. Okay, what about Scourge the Invincible Martyr?
Scourge is the same approach as Anathema. You throw on your Unleash the Dragon, you go up, you start burning him, and then you wait for the diadems to start spawning. Use the diadems to cancel his immune phase, and it's as simple as that. It's quite literally hit your action skill and run in circles.
Nice. What do you feel this build excels at the most?
Rackstab is one of the best setups in the game at clearing out rooms without changing direction. You can just keep marching forward, and because you have these Novas going, because your Rakks are going to be seeking out enemies and delivering your Fish Slap, which is then, if you're using a static charge artifact, going to create these electric chains that also clear the room. You have so much area denial going on that enemies will just explode around you. You don't have to look at anything. You don't have to shoot. You don't have to aim, which is why I made it. And you can just run in a straight line and clear whatever content you choose to do.
How do you feel about the 5 points recently added to the game along Psycho Krieg and the Fantastic Fustercluck?
So those 5 skill points added some nice flexibility to Rackstab. You do have a few deviation options for the skill tree. Mostly the things that matter in this tree more than anything else are the V1 damage boost that I mentioned, being Frenzy, Pack Tactics, Interplanetary Stalker, and the elemental damage boost you get from the Spider Ant Scorcher. Those matter more than anything else. Beyond getting those things, you actually have a lot of flexibility. And as the level cap has increased, this build has gotten even more flexible. Those 5 points from the Psycho Krieg DLC have enabled things like you can go down to Dominance in the blue tree if you so choose. And that, because they reworked Dominance recently to be an absolutely amazing skill. Seriously, it is really incredible. You melee an enemy or you trigger a critical hit on an enemy, both of which are things this build do a lot of, and then all the other enemies will just turn on it. It's fantastic. It is absolutely an option if you so choose. You take a bit of a damage hit compared to the recommended skill tree here, but it is nice quality of life, and that is flexibility enabled by the level cap increases.
Sweet. Do you feel this build stood to benefit greatly from having those 5 points?
It didn't benefit as much as other builds have. Rakk Stab pretty much came together at level 60, and anything beyond there is just, oh,
Quality of
cool.
life.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's just say if you had 4 more points to add to your talent tree, where would you put them?
We could put another point in Grim Harvest because the perfectionist in me doesn't always like leaving skills 1 point short of being maxed.
Yeah.
We could do that. That would also give us more gun damage and action skill damage. That's very nice for our setup. We could then take the rest of those points and go down to dominance in this particular version of the build. And as mentioned, dominance is a great survivability tool, because what better way to live longer than to have all the enemies attack each other?
That's amazing. Cool. Well, maybe we'll see that. We don't know. What weapons and gear will be utilized for this build?
So the absolute core of this build, the thing that you need to make all of the other pieces fall in place, is going to be your shield. It's going to be the Stinger shield from the Guardian Takedown. This drops from Anathema, the first of the 2 bosses. And what this shield does is, it can be a bit confusing to look at. It says while full, you gain a melee damage boost. Note that this is actually way more impactful than other melee boosts, because it, suffice it to say, it calculates differently. It's much more attractive than it seems. But the main draw, the main draw of this shield is it makes a Nova when it breaks. And this Nova from the Stinger is different from others because it counts as melee damage.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
Yes, and not only is it melee, it's a Nova, so it's still splash damage. If you have an elemental Stinger, it is also elemental damage. So we're stacking up all of these damage boosts that'll apply to this Nova, and we're using the anointment on action skill start, trigger shield effects that would happen on break or fill. This is going to happen every time we use our Rakk attack. So every time the game goes, oh, your shield's broken now, Nova happens.
Oh my God.
So it's synergies on top of synergies. It's making things do other things. Everything this build does is logically, it makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, that does that.
Messing with my brain right now.
When you turn around and look back, you're like, oh, so hitting my Rakk attack makes me light things on fire because I did melee damage? It doesn't make sense until you go through all of the individual interactions. And that's something I love doing as a theory crafter, as a build maker, just defying how people think builds are made.
Yeah, you're one of those guys, man. You're one of those guys that finds the synergies. It's amazing.
I appreciate that. It's something I'm very passionate about.
That's great, clearly.
Other gear choices we have, they're all about maximizing the Stinger. So our weapon that we're going to spend a lot of time holding is the Psycho Stabber. Now, this was buffed some time ago.
Okay.
It gives a significant damage boost to melee. You might remember it used to give 120% melee, and then it was buffed, and now the card reads 340%.
Wow.
Well, it's not actually that. What it actually is, it still has the 120, but the 340 is really a 2.2 times multiplier to all of your other melee boosts instead of actually being that percentage. So the way that works out is you get a lot more than you would have if they had just upped the 120. So they gave us a nice gift with how they chose to buff that weapon. So just holding a Psycho Stabber in your hand will massively increase the damage of all the melee related things you do.
Including your shield?
Including the shield, especially the shield. This will work on the fish slap. This will work on the shield. This will work on if you decide to ground slam, if you decide to go up and punch something, it'll work on all of that stuff.
Awesome. I got chills. So cool.
And leaning into that, the anointment of choice on it is the 300 over 90 anoint is what we refer to as. Gain 300% increased damage against enemies over 90% health. So against anything we're just initiating a fight against, this damage type is V2 damage. So this massive, chunky 300% number. We're going to use this to start fights, and it's going to multiply all our other boosts. And because, hey, it's 300, the just being over 90 part doesn't matter because things get one shot.
Wow.
Now, if you end up in any situation where you need to use multiple novas, such as against enemies in immune phases, if you really want to crank up your damage after that point, you can switch to a Psycho Stabber with, say, a 100% melee on action skill and anoint is a good choice. Or we can do a bit of a funky option. This one is going to be people are going to question this more than perhaps anything else about the build. We're using a purple alien barrel doll pistol because this specific item is the only one in the game that is capable of rolling the 200% splash anointment, but also has a nice chunky melee boost on it of 160%. So this is the highest combination you can get of those two things together. There are weapons like the Psycho Stabber that give more of a melee boost, but can't roll the splash anointment. So this is the best middle ground. This will be what you hold against anything that you can't outright one shot.
Interesting. All right, cool. What's the name of the gun?
It'll be a Wyvern is the name. You can find it in purple varieties. You can find it in blue varieties. It is an alien barrel doll pistol.
And where does it drop?
Unfortunately, it's unsourced because it is a non-unique weapon. So you'll have the same chances of getting this as getting, say, a Stagecoach Jacobs shotgun or any of your favorite non-uniques that you'll see of below legendary rarity while leveling. The best way to get it is going to be get lucky.
Oh no, that's like my double penetrating pneumatic bang stick I used to use all the time.
Oh, like once you get a good bang stick, it's so hard to replace those.
It is.
They're so rare, getting the ones with really good parts.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you went over a couple anointments. Let's just review. What anointments should players aim for?
You should aim for, on your Psycho Stabber, you want 300 over 90. Okay. That is your opener. That is your bread and butter. That is, you're going to walk up to them and be like, hey, I have this. You give me loot now. And then on your Wyvern, you're going to go for 200 splash. Now, if you don't want to farm a Wyvern, because trust me, it is painful, you could go for a second Psycho Stabber with 100% melee instead.
Okay.
They're very comparable. The math works out down to just a couple percentages which one will pull ahead. They're functionally, they will do the same things for you.
Interesting. Awesome. Okay. And what about on your grenade mod and...
On the grenade mod, we're going to be using action skill and radiation damage. This will enable our static charge artifact, if we're wearing it, to deliver that and give us nice coverage of all these radiation explosions everywhere when enemies die. Not only is it very effective for increasing your clear speed, it just sounds good.
Nice. All right. That's your favorite sound, right? You go to bed.
I love it. I can fall asleep to it every night. And then on our shield, we have action skill start, trigger, shield, breaker, fill effects. That is the core of the build. That is the most important item, having that on your stinger.
All right, cool. Good to know.
For the other slots, we have a face puncher as an emergency second wind option, or if you need to hit something from range that your Rakks are very determined not to go after, because Rakks are adorable, but man, sometimes they just, it's almost like they act on their own and don't do exactly what I as a gamer want them to do in my head.
Yeah.
But Face Puncher is a nice remedy for those sort of situations. And a nice thing that I recommend all flaks have for all builds that's not just part of this build is a res pistol from DLC 5 if you own the designer's cut, because you can use this to revive your pet remotely. You can just shoot your pet with it and it gets up. You don't need to be near it. You don't need to hold the button for that long duration. You can just get your pet up, and every flak can make use of this.
That's cool. Interesting little tidbit I was not aware of. That's great. So what gear, if anything, would you consider essential?
The Stinger Shield is going to be absolutely essential to this, and that can be a bit painful to farm because it only comes from one place, but trust me, it is hugely impactful. you're going to want to get it in as many elements as you can. The one that's most important would be corrosive, because the vast majority of takedown bosses are armored. So corrosion will do the best against those. But really, getting any stinger of an element with that anointment is going to be the cornerstone of this build. Now, the fish slap is very nice to have. It's not something that you can farm until the Revenge of the Cartels event comes back, but there are alternatives if you like its piss grenade, if you like the hex grenade or the hunter seeker grenade. Its piss provides a damage debuff, and the other two grenades I mentioned help with your head count triggers to improve your cooldown and give you even more racks.
Awesome. Are there any specific roles that you consider ideal as class-specific passives on the mod?
You're absolutely going to want splash damage in as many places as possible.
Weird.
You're going to want melee damage in as many places as possible.
Okay.
And cooldown in as many places as possible. Those are going to be the important things. Splash radius also helps your quality of life, as it makes your stinger just bigger. Instead of, hey, I'm going to blow up everyone in the immediate vicinity of me, it goes to, hey, I'm going to blow up everyone on my entire screen.
Nice. Fantastic. Okay, interesting. Just to reiterate, what artifact or artifacts do you use?
You have lots of options with this setup. The one that I have equipped most often is going to be a static charge. Okay. In terms of prefix, you have a couple options based on preference here. You can run a knife drain static charge, and what that will enable is any melee damage you deal gains lifesteal with that artifact. Now, remember, our stinger shield is melee damage. So you run around, you hit your rack attack, let's say you're almost dead. Your Nova clears everything in the room, and because you hit everything in the room with melee damage, you just heal to full immediately. So there are no issues with survivability with this build. If you run a knife drain, you will never die except if you blow yourself up.
Wow, which is a big issue because Flak and Vanilla has had a lot of issues with survivability that were supposed to be resolved with the purple tree. So that's great.
Survivability with Flak has always been a bit of a dance, and yeah. I like approaching it in non-conventional ways. This is one of the more interesting ways to do that. But you don't have to go that route if you don't want to, and for certain bosses, I would recommend you just be as aggressive as possible. And the best defense is a good offense in some cases. And that's when we put on the Unleash the Dragon artifact. This drops from El Dragon on Eden 6 at the Jacob's Estate. And what this does is when you melee an enemy, they get a burn placed on them that scales based off of how much your initial melee hit dealt. And now this damage over time effect, to put this in perspective, Rackstab can make the ticks, each individual tick of this burn, tick for over the visual damage cap of the game. So over 1.1 billion. You can just have that ticking about once every half a second.
To quote Moxie, that's a lot of damage.
It is. And the way this happens is through knowledge of damage formula, as I preached at the beginning, as I've been saying quite often. And you might have heard me mention the concept of elemental damage being super important because of something people refer to as double dipping earlier. Now, what this means is your initial melee hit, if your stinger is elemental, that is going to calculate the elemental damage in its formula. And then your Unleash the Dragon is going to be like, okay, so that's how much damage that did. I'm also elemental though. So that boost is going to apply to the Unleash the Dragon burn as well. So it comes up twice in your damage formula for some of your effects.
Ooh, that's nuts. Okay, so we talked about the grenade mod earlier. Just to reiterate, you use the fish slap from the cartel event?
Yes, I use the fish slap because of its synergy with the Peregrine class mod.
Oh, nice. And what about the anoint? Did you say radiation?
Yes, radiation is the best choice here.
And the shield is the stinger?
Yes, Stinger from Guardian Takedown.
And anoint, just to be specific?
On action skill start, trigger effects on shield breaker fill. Might not be the exact wording, but that's the effect.
Great. I just wanted to go through all of those. Everybody can get their list of all the stuff they need to go grind for.
Yes.
Okay, so what could be a suitable stopgap until I have the optimal loot needed?
So you can, until you get a good Psycho Stabber, you're just going to want to hold a weapon with the 390 or 100 melee or 200 splash annoyance, any of those you can get, with the highest melee damage bonus you can get your hands on. If you have any kind of COV pistol that is capable of rolling these parts, you can get up to 120% blade there on just any random purple COV pistol. That's very helpful. You can there's no real replacement for the Stinger for the setup, unfortunately, because Stinger is the only shield that deals melee damage. But for every other slot, there's some degree of compromise you can make. There's a lot of good melee artifact effects that you can choose from. You have several prefix options. You don't necessarily need to do the knife drain strategy. You can do a snowdrift if you want to move faster. And that was what I did in the endgame rush challenge for extra mobility. For the grenade, you have several options. For the class mod, I have famously shown on my Twitch channel that you can run any class mod you like with this build, or you can run no class mod to prove a point. And the build still functions. All it'll affect is how much damage you do. And you can use famously underused class mods such as the Rakk Commander, the Friendly Trainer. You can use those on Rackstab if you so choose. The best option is going to be Peregrine, but below that, my recommended picks would be the Cosmic Stalker class mod for raw damage output, the Rakk Commander class mod because it is the best cooldown option for Rakk attack in the entire game. Better even than Peregrine, just doesn't give the damage that Peregrine does. You could use a Rakk Pack class mod to give you damage, extra cooldown, more racks flying out in general. You have a lot of flexibility in terms of gear for this setup.
Fantastic. So what Guardian rank talents should players focus on to get the most bonus stats for this build?
In terms of passive bonuses, you're going to look at, again, the damage formula angle. The most impactful ones you're going to grab are going to be melee damage and elemental damage. For the same reasons we grab those on gear, those are going to directly help your Stinger and your melee artifact effects. In terms of skills, not a lot are hugely impactful here. Groundbreaker will help, but the phenomenon of Groundbreaker is that it's better on a non-melee setup than it is on a melee setup.
Really interesting.
Because it delivers, it builds up from your non-melee damage. Now, if the bulk of your damage is already melee, that is not going to build up Groundbreaker, but just deliver it. Okay. So while we do make use of it in the setup, you can turn it off and it won't affect the gameplay loop a single bit. Everything's the same. It's just free damage occasionally. Hollow Point is something that can be very nice because, for instance, if you're using the Static Charge artifact, well, that can crit. It can crit naturally, but it also delivers your bonus element that you have on your grenade from that anointment. And that can be made to crit as well. So if you kill an enemy with a critical hit, it makes this nice explosion that'll wipe out mobs and save you some work. So Hollow Point is quite nice. Other than that, Guardian rank is not very impactful in this build at all.
What Guardian rank talents, if any, should a player disable to use this build?
You can leave on whichever Guardian rank talents you want, because we're not doing a traditional melee build a la previous Borderlands games where you want your Roid shield down for extra damage. We are forcibly making the game say, hey, your shield is empty now, even if it isn't. And when our shield should empty itself naturally, like if we take a bunch of damage, we get another Nova that way. So there's no talents that hurt us here. Great.
Okay, so when spending a Guardian token, what are the stats that players should focus on spending the tokens on?
Elemental damage and melee damage are the cornerstones. We want those elsewhere on our gear. We absolutely still want them in Guardian rank. Gun damage will help if you should need to use a gun in emergency situations, such as your face puncher to get out of fight for your life. But largely, you're just going to focus the melee and elemental.
So weird. It's just like I always thought those are things that you need to focus on with Amara. But I mean, I guess if it works. Are there any mayhem modifiers that one should keep an eye out or that will enhance this build?
Speed Demon. Speed Demon is fantastic for this setup because it lets you close that gap. It's largely a close and mid-range build. You're using your Rakks to deliver your fish slaps via Peregrine at medium range, but at close range, you are using your Stinger Novas. And you can use splash radius increases to increase the radius at which you can do damage, but ultimately you are going to close the gap with enemies, and Speed Demon will assist you with that.
Awesome. How did you test this build?
The general way I test a lot of my builds is because I maintain the Flak builds document, and we have a standard of quality where any build in the document needs to go through Mayhem 10 or Mayhem 11, true Guardian and Malawan takedown in a reasonable amount of time. The first place I take any build that I make is true Guardian takedown. If it can do that efficiently, then I start breaking it down further and optimizing it. But I stress test it to the highest degree as fast as possible. Awesome.
What were some initial impressions that you had when you first tested this build?
The first question I had was why? Because I didn't understand why what I was doing was working as well as it was. Because the Stinger Shield interaction that's at the core of this build was something that I was keyed into because someone was using it on an Amara build, and I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. I didn't know that shield did that. And I just happened to have one because I had been messing with that build. So I threw it on Flak and was like, oh, Flak can do this too. Flak can do this better.
Nice. What did the numbers look like compared to similar builds, both ones you have crafted and ones you've seen other community members display?
The numbers on this build range from having, you can see a 200 or a 500 mil static charge chain pop out. So you hit an enemy, and then a chain that's a portion of the damage you dealt will go hit another enemy for several 100 million damage.
Wow.
But a lot of the time, you just won't see a damage number because there is a visual damage number cap of something just north of 1 billion damage. So if you kill an enemy and you don't see a number, it's because you did somewhere over about 1.3 billion. 1.03 rather.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there are any changes that Gearbox can make to the game that would further refine this build without making it drastically over or underpowered?
For this particular build, I feel like it's gotten pretty much everything it'll ever get out of the character without some sort of massive sweeping change that I frankly don't think would be even necessary. Flak is a character that is defined by versatility and damage formula, and Rackstab takes advantage of these things to a degree where we have so many free points. You can do pretty much whatever with this build. I really feel like it is very at home with what it is and where it is in the grand scheme of things.
Awesome. Well, we are at the end. This is insane. This has been such a really cool, interesting new take on Flak, and I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you all so much for having me. This has been an absolute blast to do, and I really, really enjoy doing things like this. You're all wonderful people, and this is just a great show. I'm so honored to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so kind. Is there a build that you can maybe take 15 seconds to tease for your next appearance?
The next build that I would maybe bring on here is something using the very underutilized Flak Purple Tree. It's very niche and very hard to squeeze the damage out of, but I have a couple setups that could do some interesting things with it.
Sweet. I'm excited to see that. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on the show. And thank you so much, Quag, for joining us. And Quag, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter or on Twitch at TBJ Quag, at TBJ_Quag is my handle on both of those. I stream 6 days a week. I have a YouTube channel that I kind of neglect, so don't really bother. But
you should bother. Do it. Go check out his channel. Do you have a link for that in your Twitch channel?
Yes.
By chance?
Yes.
Okay.
My Twitter and my Twitch both link to each other.
Awesome. Fantastic. And you can find me everywhere on the internet at SCHBIFTYFIVE. Featuring enough aviary aggression to make Alfred Hitchcock proud, Quag's Rackstab build will blow your enemies away, and in record-setting time. Reports of Flak's demise as a top damage competitor are greatly exaggerated, with the Beastmaster putting their minion menagerie on full display. Quag, for your amazing end game hunt run and for bringing us this beautiful bird build. I award you the title of Ultimate Vault Hunter.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute honor.
The much discussed fourth skill trees are out now as a part of the Designer's Cut and Season Pass 2. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you pick up the new DLC today. Thank you so much for joining us on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you'd like more details about this build, you can find a link to more information and the build in the podcast description section. We'll return in 2 weeks on February 11th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific time. Happy looting to all you Ultimate Vault Hunters out there.